Good afternoon. Welcome to the Wyoming Farm Bureau Federation's legislative update, the first one for the 2012 legislative session. This session, of course, is a budget session, which means two things. One of them is that for non-budget items to get introduced, you have to have a 2/3 majority of votes before they can get introduced. And the other one is that it's a 20-day session. The session started off with the governor's State of the State address to the legislative body. This was a little unusual this time because he really stressed the issues of importance of agriculture to the state's economy, as well as how it interplays with a lot of the other activities that go on in this state. Two things that are really big for the legislative body to discuss is the redistricting. A lot of those things are taking up some time for the legislative body. And the other thing is the budget. And as that budget goes on, we'll have a little more information. The big item, of course, is how much money is the state going to have to spend. There's been some updates on the income, and while we thought we were in good shape, our declining budget revenues may change that, and we may see some deeper cuts in some state agencies. One of the bills I'd like to talk about is a bill, House Bill 107, which is put into the hopper to discuss combining the Department of Agriculture, the Livestock Board, and the Agribusiness Division of the Wyoming Business Council. That bill hasn't been heard in committee yet, but we are watching that, and of course we have policy opposing combining the Livestock Board and the Department of Agriculture. Another bill that was heard up in the Senate Ag Committee last night, Senate File 18, was reimbursement of livestock in those instances where diseases cause the livestock to have to be destroyed or sold. Right now, USDA has a reimbursement program, but that doesn't always cover the costs. And of course, if an animal does have to be sold at a auction for disease purposes, many times that doesn't bring the fair market value. This bill would just provide a little more compensation for that livestock producer. Of course, the big bill for the agriculture community is Senate File 41, the Wolf Management Bill. There was a lot of work by the governor's office trying to reach a compromise with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and the Department of Interior. We feel we've got that done. The Travel, Recreation, and Wildlife Committee heard the bill last Thursday, I believe it was, and they are sending that bill forward pretty much the way it came out of the Travel Rec Committee's last discussion in Thermopolis, with some minor changes. I'm going to turn it back over to my colleague Brett Moline for a couple of bills. So Brett.
Thanks, Ken. The first bill I'd like to talk about is a bill that did not get enough votes to go through introduction. It was Senate File 53. This bill would have given the State Land Board and the Game and Fish Commission the ability to use eminent domain to gain access for recreation, mainly hunting and fishing. This is a bill we were glad to see die. It does not meet our policy, and it would have been a bill that we would not have been able to support. Another bill that we've worked on is Senate File 42. This bill was a large project funding through the Wildlife Trust Fund. This bill did make it through the TRW committee in the Senate. We have a lot of concern on how much money is being spent on conservation easements. Just in this bill through state funding was about $6.6 million. We have concerns that we're locking more lands up into perpetual conservation easements, and of course this does not fit our policy. Another bill in the Senate, Senate File 19, deals with predator management boards and how the voting is established, who can vote in these boards. Essentially it says that in order to vote at these meetings, you have to have had proof that you have paid predator fees in the last year in the state of Wyoming. That was a bill that we support. Senate File 20 is a livestock disease reporting liability bill. This bill was pulled. It was felt it wasn't ready to go through the scrutiny of the legislative session. It will be a bill that we look at in the interim. House Bill 10 is a bill that we support. It is a bill that will take away the statutory restriction of only being able to have 2 elk licenses within a calendar year. This bill will remove that, and additional licenses will be able to be obtained by residents and non-resident hunters in Wyoming. This bill is in response to some of the areas that are having tremendous overpopulation of elk. This will give the Game and Fish another tool to deal with this. This is a bill that we worked on over the interim a little bit, and it's a bill we support. We'll think will help out our members. Senate Joint Resolution number 1, wildlife property of the state, is attempting to get bills that will, or get a constitutional amendment that will say that the wildlife of Wyoming, in Wyoming, belongs to the people of Wyoming. This bill has not been heard in committee yet, but is one we'll probably report on next week. That's it with the bills I'd like to discuss today, and next I would like to introduce Keith Kennedy with Custom Ag Solutions. Keith?
Thanks, Brett. For 2012, Custom Ag Solutions has partnered with USDA's Risk Management Agency and the Wyoming Farm Bureau in an effort to inform Wyoming farmers and ranchers about risk management and the availability, features, and limitations of federal crop insurance programs. We'll be offering a presentation, Farming is Risky Business, during Wyoming Farm Bureau's legislative meeting on February 27th. And while Wyoming farmers and ranchers have witnessed dramatic changes in agricultural practices over the years, one thing never has changed: farming is a risky business. Today, many successful producers utilize a deliberate and knowledgeable approach to risk management as a vital part of their operating strategy. Those include addressing 5 primary areas of risk management: managing production risk, market risk, financial risk, legal risk, as well as human risk. Ideally, producers will address those through a strategic risk management plan. We'll be discussing this at the meeting, as well as discussing how producers address their risk tolerance and the ways they address their risk tolerance through combinations of 5 different approaches, including retaining risk, shifting that risk, reducing risk, self-insuring, or avoiding risk altogether. Of course, we need to evaluate the frequency of those risks and the possible negative consequences. As a general rule, formal insurance strategies are meant to address risks that either include low occurrences or, secondly, severe negative consequences. We also want to go through, and will go through, some information on the benefits of goal setting, as well as go through several of Risk Management Agency's current insurance plans. And with that, I'll turn it back to you, Brett.
Thanks, Keith. Stay tuned for next week. We'll have the update on what's happened in the second week of the 2012 legislative session. Thank you.